This part of the review is brought to you by Mountain Dew Code Red because I'm coughing like a fiend. The book goes in and lists 19 different government types, and I've also reviewed the AD&D 2nd edition world building guide that also went into really good detail with the different types of government for a fantasy setting. I think this is a very invaluable setting, sort of crunchy detail in the book itself. I just thought it very, very useful. Here's another quote. Heroic fantasy is made of fortunes and king's ransoms, in loot gained most cleverly and bravely, and lost in a twinkling, by various means, thievery, gambling, debauchery, gift-giving, bribes, and so forth. The reality AD&D seeks to create through role-playing is that of the mythical heroes such as Conan, Fafhrd, and the Grey Mouser. I probably messed up the pronunciation of that. Kothar, Elric, and their ilk. So yeah, again, we're not really worried too much about bookkeeping. You're going to go out there and just spend money like crazy. Taxes, tolls, tariffs, fees, duties, and tithes should be a very big part of a game. And I don't know if I've ever actually used any of those. I've used tithes, I think, for cleric players, but that was probably about it. Placing larger populations of monsters in areas of the map and having kingdoms of their own is likely, depending on the flavor of the setting. Percentages of types of monsters might also be good for different campaigns and different kingdoms. Another quote. Variety of setting is easily done by sketching the outlines of your world's history, establishing power bases, setting up conflicts, distributing the creatures, bordering the states, and so forth. It gives the basis for a reasoned, if not totally logical, in terms of our real-world approach. Thoughtless placement of powerful magical items has been the ruination of many a campaign. Importance of moderation in giving items is stressed. He also warns against the Monty Hall campaigns giving out too many magical items, and killer dungeons, which I thought was kind of funny. Because we all know that Gary Gygax wrote the Tome of Horrors, which is exactly the thing he's warning against here. So, interesting. Gary tells us that using the random magic items isn't a great idea, and that each one should be thoroughly thought on. Before you throw a magic item in a campaign, just really think about the consequences of doing so. There's a sample dungeon in the book. Talks about doors. As a rule of thumb, all doors are hard to open and hard to keep closed or open for PCs, while inhabitants of the dungeon find little difficulty in these regards. And this kind of talks about that mythical underworld where sort of like the dungeon itself is fighting you. It resists you in minor ways, tries to spook you or scare you or redirect you. I think this is something that definitely has been lost with more modern editions of D&D. Excuse me. There's a section on NPCs. There's a nice long list of NPC traits, various groupings of different types of NPCs. I think this can be used in any RPG fantasy game out there. A lot of the stuff in the DMG I think is just very valuable. More Mountain Dew. Another quote. In all cases, the DM is absolutely obligated to play the monster in question to the best of his or her ability, according to the characteristics of the monster and the circumstances of the encounter. There's cost for creating certain underground things, and above ground for player or characters that want to do so. Talks about giving good players a break instead of having them die just non-climactic deaths. Have something else happen instead, like the loss of an arm, loss of an eye, something just as bad as dying or worse than dying. I thought that was an interesting way to deal with death. There's a section on handling troubling players. I think I'm just going to read this because I've had issues with problem players in the past. Some people say that problem players don't exist. I dare to disagree. Some players will find more enjoyment in spoiling a game than in playing it, and this ruins the fun for the rest of the participants. So it must be prevented. Those who enjoy being loud and argumentative, those who pout or act in a childish manner when things go against them, those who use the books as a defense when you roll them out of line should be excluded from the campaign. Simply put, ask them to leave or do not invite them to participate again. Peer pressure is another means with which we can you can basically use peer pressure to control players who are not totally obnoxious and who you deem worth saving. These types typically attempt to give orders and instructions even when their characters are not present. Wow, that one happens a lot. Tell other characters what to do even though their character role they have has nothing to do with that the one being instructed, or continually attempt actions or activities their characters would have no knowledge of. This is that nice in-character, out-of-character demarcation. When any such proposal or suggestion or orders are made, simply inform the group that that is no longer possible under any circumstances because the player in question. Basically just saying, like, that was out of character. Your characters just don't think of that idea. Don't think of that possible solution. The group will then act to silence him or her and control undesirable outbursts. The other players will most certainly let such individuals know about undesirable activities when it begins to affect their characters and their enjoyment of the game, using peer pressure to keep players in line. Strong steps short of expulsion can be an extra random monster die, obviously rolled with maybe a DEM evil face, like clatter clatter. The attack of an ethereal mummy, which always strikes by surprise, naturally. Points of damage from blue bolts from the heavens striking the offender's head. The DM is angry. Or the permanent loss of a point of charisma, appropriately, from the character belonging to the offender. If these have to be enacted regularly, then they are not effective and stronger measures. Then effective and stronger measures must be taken. Again, the ultimate answer to such a problem is simply to exclude the disruptive person from further gatherings. I think more RPGs should have sections like this. That's very good advice. I've had lots of problem players, and I tend to get a lot of abuse as a DM. I don't know, it kind of sucks. Mountain Dew. Talks about Boot Hill and Gamma World conversions for AD&D. There's random treasure and a listing of magic items. Big long list here. I didn't really read through them. There's an awesome random dungeon generation, which I thought was really cool. I don't usually have a problem generating a dungeon, but it's very interesting with how they had it done there. There's random wilderness terrain, lots of random monster tables, random generation of creatures from the lower planes, head, visage, eye color, nose, facial descriptions, etc. Kind of just a way to generate cool monsters, I think, that have very chaotic natures. There's big landscape tables of monster stats. The fact that this wasn't in the monster manual was kind of strange for me, but I don't know. There's also lots of white space in the chart. It seemed like they wasted some space. In the very back of the book, it's just lots of cool stuff. There's gambling games, like literally instructions for a game. There's a trap table with nasty suggestions, tricks of dungeons, attributes and features of dungeons, air current, odor, general things in the rooms, unexplained sounds, furnishings, religious articles and furnishings, torture chamber furnishings, magic-like rooms, general descriptions, miscellaneous utensils, clothing, footwear, jewelry items, food and drink, condiments, chamber room and other space lists, herbs, spices, medicinal vegetables, magical substances. The list goes on and on in the back of this book. The back of this book, there's a lot of things in this book I think it can be pertinent to any campaign whatsoever. There's conjured animals, summoned monsters, inspirational reading from different fantasy games. Things is just really cool. I could go on talking about the AD&D DMG for a long time. So enjoy it, pick it up, you find it, and I'll talk to you guys later. Mountain Dew.